Recording in progress.
See, we waited long enough. David Pack shows up. Bet that's my email telling me it's time to start. Good evening. Welcome to the West Jordan City Committee of the Whole for Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. The following members of City Council are present. We have Councilmember Jacob, we have Councilmember Worthen, we have Councilmember Green, Councilmember Bloom, Councilmember Pack, Councilmember McConaughey. We also have with us Council Office staff. Mayor Burton is with us. Dave Qualey is sitting in for Rob Wall. And we have a multitude of city staff here tonight. Thanks for everybody being here. So we do have a quorum. We can proceed. The first item up for business is the drinking water master plan. And I believe that unless I'm mistaken, Mr. Davenport is here to ask us questions about what we want to see am I close? Okay, so what we're gonna do is, Greg, we're gonna turn this over to you so that you can ask us or see what we need to do for these particular, for this particular item. So please, go ahead.
The report's really long. If you remember where we left off last time was talking about capital improvements. I would like to answer any questions you have about that. If you don't have any questions, I got some questions from Kayleen that I could read and answer. So, but I'd first start off with any questions you guys might have and see if I could answer them.
Do any members of the council have any more questions for Mr. Davenport?
Okay, let me read some questions from Kayleen then. She said that in the report, it says we need $13 to $17 million in the next 10 years for rehab and replacement. And she was wondering if that was in the budget and how we would really pay for that. The consultant, when they put this together, we've never really had a plan for replacement and rehabilitation in the master plan. This is the first time they've done it. They picked a way to deal with replacement. They took the value of the system, divided it by its service life, and said that's how much you need to spend every year. That's the most expensive plan that they could have chosen. Most municipalities, from my opinion, don't choose that plan. They do a plan to analyze the life that they have in the ground, and they replace it before that life ends. A published service life is not the actual service life that you're going to get out of a pipe. An iron pipe might get 60, or it might get 80, or it might get 90. It just depends on the soil that it's in and the use that it got during that time. So a lot of communities, instead of just replacing it 60, like this report says, they will do studies to see how good that condition that pipe is, and they'll replace it when it's time. So that would bring down that 10 to 13. So while I like to have you keep it in your mind, I want you to remember that's the most expensive plan you could do. In another place, they mention somewhere around 2.5 to 5 million. I think that's probably more appropriate for the city of West Jordan, but I wouldn't actually tell you, please put that on a budget until the city had a plan that said, we are going to replace the following pipes in the following areas. And because I don't have that yet, I need to do that and come up with that plan. That's a great number for you to consider, but I wouldn't put that in a budget for next year.
So can I follow up with that then?
Yeah.
This plan that you're talking about for replacement, when is a good guess on when you and your department will have that done?
I would love to have it done before next summer. we have to do this anyway because of lead and copper. So it first starts off with every service line and how long it's been in the ground and what type of pipe it is. And then from there, what we would typically do is we'll take a break history. So then I'll take a line, and if it's been in the ground for 60 years, but it's never had a single break, I'm not going to go replace that line. But if I had a line in the ground like 27th where it breaks every single year, I'm going to say, let's fix that pipe. And 27th is one of those pipes that's on the plan. You put it in the budget to have a design this year and to replace next year. So that's typically how it would get in the plan. It would be age and type and then break history. And then us knowing, hey, that's the ones I've got to replace. And so I'd really love to give you that plan, and I'd love to have it by next summer, but it won't be a long-term plan because, again, what we can probably afford is that length of time, break history. Typically, as pipes start to break, okay, now it's time to replace that pipe. It's not in good shape anymore. Does that answer your question?
I'm just, yeah, but what I'm wondering is just as a future look, where we can be so that we can start anticipating costs and capital improvements. Right, I'm going to say this. Right now, it seems like what we're doing is I'm taking a handful of darts and I'm going like that and I'm going, well, it's out there someplace. You know what I'm talking about? And I'd like to narrow that shot group so that we've got a better idea of what budgets we need and those kind of things.
I would too. I'm in agreement with you. I'd like to do that. As they talked about in their report, we didn't pay them enough money to do that. That's a really expensive report for a city that hasn't done that before. So the first start in that is that lead and copper, identifying every line type, how long it's been there type study.
Well, I think that'd be a good start.
The other question she asked is of 180 million, because that's what they said we need to spend in the next 10 years, how much of that comes from new construction or impact fees and how much of that comes from other items? If you look in the Appendix A, it shows that out of 130 million, 19 of that is for existing repairs and existing deficiencies and needs, and 111 could be attributed to impact fees or new construction and future growth. That's why it's so important to adopt this so I can get the 111 million in our impact fees and we can get that back. 50 million of then again was supposed to, the 180 was rehab, and I'm not sure how fast we want to spend that, but out of the 50, if we did that in 10 years, that would be 5 million a year is what they were thinking. So to get an idea, you can see those numbers exactly if you look at Appendix A of how much is new construction and how much is existing deficiencies.
And that's 19 million over how many years?
10.
So
1.9 million a year.
Well, I know where we can get 1.3 million almost overnight. Did I say that? No, I'm serious. Is that
good?
I think Councilmember McConaughey would agree with me on this one. Is that given the deficiencies with the budget and those kind of things, and maybe we can't do it all at once, but I think it's time that we may need to start looking at eliminating the enterprise fund transfer, using the 1.3 million, figure out how to come up with that 1.3 in the general budget or in the general fund, and use that 1.3 million a year to be part of that capital improvement over the long term. I mean, if we just did the transfer fund right now, that's 13 million of the 19 million.
Right.
And so I'm just throwing out ideas here that we can think about for the budget situation next year. But maybe, because I'm just going to tell you, I'm very uncomfortable raising water rates to come up with capital if we got 1.3 million sitting there that we're using in the enterprise fund. And here's the goofy thing: we're using the water to transfer to the enterprise fund, and then if we have a reserve, it goes to the CIP fund that's funding some other project, not the water project. And it's like, okay, we can start to do better on that. You know what I mean?
I do. And I think, again, I'm glad that's why it's in this report. I'm glad we have something to look at. And I hope to make that better for you guys as we go along.
What do you think, Councilmember McConaughey?
Lots of thoughts on that transfer, but in context of the water plan that we have tonight, I'll hold the transfer thoughts till later.
Okay.
Okay, so some other questions. Can we apply for federal grants for lead and copper? Absolutely. We'll do that as soon as our study is ready, which again will be early next year. She also asked if, is there something more we can do to improve the water quality for well water? I'll look into that. That wouldn't be in the master plan something we would look in the master plan, but that's something that I can look in separately. She asked about the cemetery tank, why it wasn't included on table 6.1. That's because it's not an existing tank. Any tank in 6.1 is already there and in service. So those will be added as soon as they're back into service. The last question that she had was, if this plan is approved, will this plan decrease from today the required storage levels we can currently require for water? And what was the level, and what does this plan suggest the level to be able to align with the new state standard? So I'll try and answer that for everybody. Our master plan says we have approximately 42,000 ERCs in our city right now. The state recognizes that based on our usage, it should be at 650 gallons per ERC. If we use that number, then with our emergency goals and that number, we have a little excess capacity in our system right now for development. If we go with the number that was in the last master plan, which is not adopted by the state and is not based on our average use, then with those 42,000 ERCs, we would need an additional 7 million gallons of storage. Since I only have 5 million gallons of storage planned right now, that would mean that any new zoning applications, I would have to go before you guys and say, we don't have capacity for that. So if you don't use the state number, if you use the other number, you are going to limit your possibilities for growth in West Jordan. The other consequence will be that we'll have to go to the ratepayers, because that will be called an existing deficiency. It won't be a future growth issue. We'll have to go to the ratepayers and ask for money so that we can fund an additional 7 million gallons of tanks. So those would be the consequences of deciding that you want to use the 821 number versus the 650 number that the state recognizes as the average use number for an ERC for storage in West Jordan. Do you guys have any questions on that? Okay.
So is our ERC number different than another city?
So the state so to explain that, before 2015, every city in the state, or every city like in the northern part of Utah, had a similar ERC number. You took 400 gallons for every resident, and you called that for your 400 gallons, and then you looked on a chart for irrigation, and it told you what it needed to be. That's how they came up with 821. 400 per resident, 400 gallons per resident, plus the chart for northern Utah for irrigation, right? The state finally said, that's really not very accurate. That doesn't really treat all cities. That's not really fair to all the cities, because they all have different needs. So they looked at 10 years of data, and they said, we'll give an ERC number to every city. So the city ERC number that we have in West Jordan is different than the Salt Lake's number, than South Jordan's number, than every other city, because our water use is different than all the different cities. Especially the ones that may have secondary water. Theirs is going to be very different from ours. So they have to store less water because they're not doing outside irrigation, if that makes sense. So that state number is a specific number assigned to our city based on our city values over the last 10 years.
Interesting.
That's a great question. Any other question on that? Okay. there's no other questions, thank you for your time.
So-
By the way, I'll give these comments to the person who put together the report. They'll make changes. We'll come back for you guys to adopt or not adopt.
Are there things that you need from us that we need to fill in the gaps in these reports? Is there anything that you specifically need from us that we've missed?
I don't mind having you guys give me feedback about budget. How would we pay for this? The capital plan. I think that's great to get those types of feedbacks. I want you to remember that this is a planning document. It's not a budgetary document. So while I'm going to use this to help me with my budget, the budget's a separate process that we go through. They're not going to be exact. Typically, these are planning numbers, so they may be a little bit larger because I have no idea when they're going to be built. When we go to budgetary, they may be lower or different, lower or higher, depending upon what I think it's actually going to come in at for bid worth. So it's mostly the capital facilities plan that I was really hoping to get some feedback, and I have got some feedback on that. That's what I really need so that I can update the impact fees, and I'm hoping that I can update the impact fees, and then I'll have money available or ERCs available so that I can get impact fees and I can pay for improvements, for new tanks, for new facilities, so I can start paying off the 111 that I really need.
Alan, how does this tie into the general plan that we're going through right now?
I'm going to, since Ms. Hanson is working on the general plan, there is a section on water conservation that's now required by state law. So let me see if she can call that up real quick, and she should be able to answer your question. Vice Chair Green.
Because one of the questions that obviously I'm going to ask is the water master plan consistent with the general plan and what we anticipate growth with? We need to make sure that they mesh so that we're not saying, well, the water master plan says one thing and our general plan says another. I just want to make sure that
The general plan is a guiding document, kind of an umbrella that oversees all of the master plans. So underneath but you're right, they should be compatible and consistent. But let me see if Ms. Hanson can speak to that.
So currently, your general plan goals focus on reducing water through smart practices. So, for example, one of your goals is to prohibit the use of ponds, pools, and other water features that provide merely aesthetic values. You have another one that talks about modifying lot sizes and buildable areas to help reduce water use for new residential development. So you have goals that go along with this plan, but you don't have specific goals as to we want to replace this amount of pipe in this X amount of years, which probably is more appropriate for the master plan anyways. But you could put an overarching goal that says support the master plan in X, Y, and Z efforts. So that way people who look at the general plan can see that this is something the city values, but it's not the nitty gritty. Does that make sense?
it does.
I think this is part of the general plan process. It's not the general plan, but it is part of the general plan process. That's what I've been told by Scott, that each master plan we do becomes a part of the general plan. And to answer your question, Kelvin, yes, we've considered the draft copies of the new general plan when we've done this so that we can comply with whatever you guys approve. Unless you approve something a lot different than what I've seen, we should be okay.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yeah, I just have a question before you sit down. The governor made an announcement today, something about water rights in the Great Salt Lake, about not approving new water rights in the Great Salt Lake Basin to.
I haven't heard that one yet. I'm going to go back and open that up right now.
So asking you a question about how that affects this will probably be a little premature. So, all right, never mind.
Thank you for letting me know about that.
Well, and maybe if you look at it and you can see how it affects, maybe you can just email us and help us particularly if there's a policy or budgetary mean, it'd be nice to know how it affects the city, but then if there's a secondary policy or budgetary thing that affects the city, maybe you can throw that in at the bottom and so that we know if there's something we need to do.
My guess is though, because of Kennecott's contamination of the western side, that it won't. We have more water rights than we're using currently, because if we used all of our water rights, we would bring contamination to our city. So we're holding those until the contamination is over, which could be for a very long time. I'll go look at it.
Any other questions for Mr. Davenport? Any comments on water master plan or anything that we need to go to? I don't see any other questions. Thanks for your time. We look forward to the modifications and future adoption. Next up is the business license code update, and it looks like Brock's coming to the podium, so it looks like he's on the hot seat tonight. So
My
Brock,
turn.
we'll let you start.
Okay, what we've done is, since we were asked to look at the business licensing Title 4, Chapter 1, we got together, the business license staff and myself and Duncan Murray, and kind of went through the entire Chapter 1 to look at any possible rewrites, updates that may need to be made. And that's what you've received for this meeting. We've cleaned up a bunch to meet state statutes, since the codes have changed legislatively since the last update. We've also cleaned up a bit where it refers to our City Works program and online applications and payments, as opposed to the code that said paper. We've gotten rid of some unintended or unneeded sections. Councilmember Whitelock was referring to the employment history of 3 years for a business license. We've gotten rid of that completely. We've discussed it pretty well, and don't feel that that's our place to determine. And then we've combined several different chapters several different chapters within Chapter 1 where it was repetitive. So we've gotten rid of a lot of the repetitive stuff just to kind of keep it a little bit more streamlined. And then we updated a lot on the appeals and enforcement portion, referring to Title 16 for enforcement, as opposed to having different rules of enforcement for business licensing than what other areas are doing through code enforcement. And also added the appeal authority for denials as opposed to the appeals board, since we do have an administrative law judge on contract. So that's kind of where we've done and what we've presented to you to this point. And we're open for any other suggestions before this gets brought back to council for the approval.
Council members. I'm gonna jump in here. I see Pamela
So I was looking for my notes.
busily scrolling through with her touchscreen. I think this is a great start, but we didn't go far enough. We need to delete more. I'm gonna refer to a couple of things. First, I think we need to do a wholesale look at definitions. We have a definition for BCI background check. Which businesses do we actually do a BCI background check? If there's a specific business, then it needs to be in that maybe that needs to be in that particular code, but it doesn't. I'm going to tell you that if I was a business, and I was a businessman in West Jordan City until we sold it a little bit, you look at 43 pages of business code and it becomes undaunting. You wonder how you get through this. And there's a couple of things that specifically, definitions, for example, in the definitions, I'm trying to get there, I'm scrolling down. We have a definition of shooting gallery. Okay, but there's no place in the ordinance that we regulate a shooting business. So it's like, why is that there? So we really need to ask, and I'm going to say this is what's getting in. I'm going to use this example specifically because we're in council meeting. If we were to drive over to the South Valley Regional Airport and we were to get on a Utah National Guard helicopter and get on one of those Blackhawks and go to 10,000 feet above ground level, flying copiously following the FAA flight pattern. What's the purpose of business licenses in West Jordan City? And I had a long discussion this afternoon. Chris Penger was standing out freezing in the cold with me. So Chris, I appreciate you freezing as we had this conversation. But what's the real purpose of the business license? Is it the paternalistic, maternalistic, we have to protect the citizens of West Jordan, or is it to provide West Jordan enough information that we can regulate business because we need to do inspections and those kind of things? And honestly, we're either pro-business or we're not. And I just like to see this simplified a lot more, and I think we could move almost all of the stuff about Title 16 to Title 16 and eliminate half this code in this particular section. But let me scroll. The part that I was wondering is under the application requirements. There's a couple of those. We need to have legal name. We need to have an assumed name. We need to have everybody who is 51% or more of a stockholder. And my question is, what's the purpose of that? Unless we can identify a solid purpose, what do we care? Why do we care in Section 3? Why do we care who's authorized to sign the checks for the business? What difference does that make to us regulating businesses in West Jordan City? What difference does it make if why does it make a difference if you're applying for a business license that you are a U.S. citizen or not? There is no, that's in the five, it's in Section 5. As far as I know, there's no restriction on, and it says, yeah, you have to be a U.S. citizen or the business license authority is empowered to waive the age requirement, but we're requiring proof of U.S. citizenship or saying that you have to be a U.S. citizen. Why? It's not a state code. And what does that do? And how do we do that when you have all kinds of permanent resident aliens and other authorized immigrants here in the country who have that? So, that's kind of some of the stuff. I'd really like the formal requirements for the certificates to be changed because I think we ought to just be emailing licenses but there's a couple other things and I'm not sure exactly where they're at, but there's a section of code in here that requires the business to post their business hours. My question is, so what? Why do we regulate that? What difference does it make? If the business posts hours or by appointment, or I've got an office over in Wayne Niederhouse's office on the 7th floor. Am I required to post my business hours for my attorney's office on the front door? And then the answer is, why do we care? There's a new section in here that we added that it says you can't give anything to a business if you're a minor without the parent's consent. My question is, where does that come from and why? What are we trying to protect? if I remember right, in most of these businesses, unless it's a highly regulated business, and I think we know which highly regulated businesses we're talking about, what difference does it make if they had a civil judgment? What difference does it make if they had I mean, right now, one of the disqualifying factors is you got a protective order issued against you. Well, last time I looked, one of the standard divorce tactics that happens all the time now is we get a protective order in a divorce. What I'm hoping that we can do is that we can go through this and instead and delete a lot. I actually think we can delete. I mean, I'm looking at 41B14, the license posting and display required. We have 11 lines of code that say you have to post your business license. I mean, how can we simplify that says post your business license in a conspicuous space and we eliminate 11 lines of code? So those, you know, and I will tell you, and I, as a business owner, I had the difficulty. We actually followed the business license code and put in the legal name of the business, and then the legal name of the business didn't match the sign. And so then the fire department got mad and made us change the name in the business license away from our legal name to some other name. And we ended up having to fill out, and I'll be blunt, I had to fill out a 9-page form to say that Jordan Water LLC is also Go H2O. How do we simplify those things for businesses? I'm actually looking, I remember looking at the one part of the title and I'm thinking, well, I broke that code. And let me give you the example. I had my water business over on the corner of 70th and Redwood. And I don't know which corner it was at the time we did this. We had 4 members of my company as an LLC. Four members, me, my wife, my son, and my daughter. My daughter got tired of managing the water store, and she sold her part of the store to my brother, to my son. Was that more than a 10% transfer? And under the current ordinance, and you've got to change on this. This is good, but under the old ordinance, it said we had to notify and get the city's approval to do that. Question is, why? And if I decided to sell my share of the LLC, if I could do that under securities laws and not get in trouble, or I gave my 25% to my wife or to my son, now do I have to report that? And what happens if and I can tell you, nothing happened because I didn't report it. So my question is, on a lot of these, what are we trying to accomplish? Now, if there's a specific business, like the massage therapy business, I don't mind beefing that up in its own additional code. I don't mind having a section on adult-oriented businesses. I don't mind that those are beefed up. I think it's ironic that we're more worried about Christmas trees in West Jordan City and who can sell those than we are about some of the other businesses in the city. And so maybe that helps. I think what you've done is a great start, but I think we can do better. And I think that we need to maybe take a step back and just say, what is our goal for what's the real reason we license businesses? Honestly, I don't think it's to protect the citizens of West Jordan, because you're going to get bad businesses no matter what you do. The better approach is, let's know what businesses are there. Let's know what what we need to, I'm gonna tell you, the tobacco specialty business stuff, we had to fix that. I think that's one that you're talking about, state law that needed to be fixed. But I will also tell you that I'm wondering if we have a violation in the city, because there's a tobacco specialty store on the corner of 90th South and 13th West, and I think it's less than 1,000 feet from the church. That's across the street and down the street.
That,
Now, I didn't measure it, but
that particular business has been there since prior to the code
that was
change.
prior to the code.
So
that's
that one is
grandfathered.
grandfathered in, yes.
That's nice to know, because it popped up when I was looking at this in business, so thank you. And so I hope you don't think I'm beating you up, because that's not my intent. My intent was to say, here's some areas that we can look at, and can we do better? Can we simplify this even better for your staff? And how do we get the business license application maybe to 1 page, 1.5 pages, whatever it does in CityWorks, so that it's simple? And then if somebody checks the box, then we may need to follow up.
I love it when you go all libertarian on me.
Well, I just think we need to keep it simple so that when somebody says, I mean, Chris Penger and I had this discussion today. What's the message? How do we send the message that West Jordan's open for business? That it's simple. Zach, you made a comment a couple of meetings ago. How do we eliminate business licenses or business license fees altogether? Well, maybe we need to. How do we deal with business license? Because honestly, and this is a discussion we had, how many businesses lie about the number of employees they have because it drops their fee a little bit lower in the tier level? Does our business licensing code actually encourage misrepresentation because they want to charge the less fee? You know where I'm going with that? So those are just a couple of my thoughts. I'll shut up. I'll let Councilmember Bloom go.
Well, Vice Chair Green covered some of my notes that I had in there with some of the asking why we had certain things, and wanted to continue that with some of the convicted of a Class B misdemeanor or greater offense. I want some clarification on why we have that, because there's some really good programs out there helping ex-cons start their own businesses and have really successful lives. And I want to make sure that we are encouraging that and not keeping people out of our city with some really amazing businesses by having that code.
In the new code you have, those have been eliminated. The Class B misdemeanor is for the if it has an effect on the type of business you're looking to run.
Yeah, no, I
You know,
totally
we don't want a
understand
sex
that.
offender
But
having a massage parlor type thing. And it does eliminate the parole, all of that from the code itself. It strikes it completely.
okay, I just don't want to make sure we're not in a gray area of, one of the, in fact, there's a business, a barbershop in particular, that is growing substantially, and it's ex-cons, and I want to make sure that we're supporting, this, yes.
Yeah, and that
make-
has been removed in the
Okay.
the
And then
revision.
my other one was why, let's say if my father is passing the business on to me, why couldn't that just be transferred instead of having to go through the whole business license again? That seems so complicated.
No, I understand, and that's why we're doing a rewrite. And
Okay.
if you want to email your suggestions to me, I welcome it.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're going through this step by step to make this more current and user friendly and easier to do. But it is one step at a time.
Oh, 100%.
I mean,
I know there's a lot in here too, and I had my notes, but I love that we're actually doing this and finally getting this process to simplify. So this is great.
Just a thought, then I'm going to give this to Councilmember McConaughey. Maybe there's a section that we put on, it's a specific section that talks about criminal type stuff, and it's in a separate section. And then some of the businesses that require that criminality issue, like the massage therapy thing that you're talking about, some of those, it refers to that specific section. So we're not redundant, but we're also not making it look like this is a requirement for every business.
That was my concern.
Kind of isolate some of these things. If there really is some special requirements for businesses, which I believe some of them have, that you've mentioned one in particular, then let's figure out how to simplify the rest of the code and put that in a section and then refer those businesses to that particular section, if you know where I'm going.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like, Duncan, I see you're writing and nodding things back there. It's almost like, let's throw this out and start over. But I'm going to give it to Councilmember McConaughey and then Councilmember Worthen.
Thank you. I actually really like what you've done. There's a lot of stuff that's been deleted. There's probably some tweaking that could happen, but I would be happy supporting what's been done now just so that we can take a few steps forward and then breathe. That said, there are a couple of comments that I had, so I shot these over to you in email so you don't have to scribble down as I'm reading. And then I CC'd Alan on that one as well. But lines 240 to 250 and then 1302, again, this is where it's talking about those who have convictions. I very much like that a lot of that was struck out, and then there was language added to it. Seemed like the intention of the language added was to say it only matters if it's pertinent to the type of business that they're trying to run. I just wanted to see if there's a way that that could be made a little more clear, because I really liked how, the thought as I read that, if somebody has been convicted of a DUI or something, there may be questions about them doing delivery business or something like that. However, if they were to do like a lemonade stand, probably not so much. So it seemed like you were trying to get applicability. I just wanted to see if there was a way to make that a little more clear. Row 840 says if there's any incorrect information in the application, the whole thing can be thrown out. I wanted to ask about materiality on that. Because let's say somebody applies for a license on January 3rd and accidentally writes 2022 instead of 2023. Well, the date's wrong. Is that basis to have it totally thrown out? Just want to ask about materiality. Also, there's another section in there, another part that says you have to list all your aliases. If I apply for business licenses Christopher McConaughey and I leave out the alias Chris, again, is that grounds for being thrown out? So, 915, throwing out the citizenship question. Yes, employment history. I like that you already had those struck out. Row 1005, where it talks about the signature, rather than say a facsimile would be accepted, can we just say electronic? Just a thought. 1020, where we talk about posting the license, instead of saying it shall be posted, can we just make it available for inspection upon request like we do with elevator certificates? Especially if I have a home-based business or if I have a rental property. Rows 1050 to 1051, we specify the manner of payment to be made, saying it needs to be done online through the city's payment portal. I would like to just strike out the method and just say it needs to be paid. If there's other options, if technology changes, if we at some point accept Venmo, would hate to say no to that because code specifically says you have to go through the city's online portal. That would be dumb. Row 1052, the header for this section, row 1048, we've struck prorations from that header, and then we struck the proration section below, but we still have prorations mentioned in that line, so I was wondering if that should be removed. 1179, we've talked about changes in ownership. If there's any change in ownership, it needs to be reported. I'm wondering if there's a threshold on that, because I can see a number of cases where it would be valuable to know. But if it's somebody who's like fractional ownership, if Granite Furniture, when they were here, a privately held company, if somebody has additional stock grants that they're given, technically ownership changed, would that require reporting and change in business license? So question on materiality there. And then last, row 1213, where we talk about the hours of operation and as well as curfew laws. Yeah, I'd like to toss the hours of operation part. I'm wondering if the museum would, never mind, sorry. The curfew, we have a line in there saying that we have to, those businesses that support minors have to be closed after curfew. I wonder if that's something that we need or we can toss, if that's covered elsewhere in code, because like, how does that cater to, or how does that matter when it comes to rentals? If I have a business license for a rental property and there are minors that live there, do I need to kick them out after curfew? I'm wondering if we've ever enforced anything there, if that's something that can be done away with. So anyway, sorry for rambling so long, but you do have all of that in email. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Councilmember Worthen.
I'm just gonna say stop hating on massage therapists. That's it.
Stop what?
Stop hating on massage therapists.
I know.
I mean, my God, I love my massage therapist, so I'm just saying.
Thank you for the recommendation.
Jeez, they're actually good business. Okay, yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
I may have missed it. Is there something in our code that requires a paper license to be sent? Anything that would prohibit the city from just being able to send me a PDF of here's your license so they don't have to put anything in the mail?
With our new program, that's exactly what we do.
But there's nothing in code prohibiting
No.
going electronic. Okay. Just wanted to make sure if we can make
The-
life
With the
easier.
new CityWorks program, it automatically, once the license is issued, will email you with the email we have on file and email you the PDF copy of it.
Perfect.
And
Yeah,
that-
as long as it's not something archaic that we have in code that's forcing us to go a more painful route. If it's process technology that needs to be updated, great. As long as it's not code and the council's fault, I'm okay. Thanks.
So I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember McConaughey on the curfew law. If we had a Denny's open in West Jordan and it's open 24 hours a day, does that subject Denny's to the liability because a couple of teenagers showed up and there are some really weird exceptions to curfew laws. And the reason why I know that is because I got tasked with trying to write a probable cause statement for some teenagers that the Taylorsville Police Department thought were violating curfew laws, and I had to go through it. And it's like, I'm declining that prosecution because you don't know if they're coming from a dance. There's all these exceptions, and all of a sudden we're creating that liability on a business, and it's like, if the kids are violating curfew, let the parents deal with it. The one question that I did have for the city attorney, and I'm trying to find that section. It's near the oh yes. Mr. Quayle, lines 1544 through 15, this is current ordinance. It specifically says the holder of a city business license is strictly liable for any and all acts of his or her own employees and for a violation by them or any provision of this title. I don't know about you, but you know, I know that you know, in tort law, I studied business licensees and business invitees, and that's about as much as I remember because I don't do tort law. What does that do if we say they're strictly liable for any or all acts of his or her own employees? And then it says, and for any violation by them of any provision of the title. I'm uncomfortable saying that that the business is liable under common law and under state statute. So am I wrong in thinking that? And we have a couple of sections that talk about the liability like that. Am I wrong in thinking that?
That's something we'll want to look at as we review these.
So will you guys take a look at that? Because I have a serious problem with imposing strict liability on a business, and because I mean technically it just says if somebody tripped on the sidewalk out front, the business is strictly liable for it because that's an act of his or her own employees maybe, and I'm not sure that I wanted, or they left a, you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, and that's something we'll definitely look at.
Cool. So if I think of anything else, I'll email you. Anybody else have any comments? Did we give you enough? And like I said, I don't think we wanted to think like we're beating up on you. This is a great start. I think Chris is right, or Councilmember McConaughey is right. We could pass this now as a baby step and move on to some of this other, but maybe if there's some of that we can clean up before it comes back. And then we can look at it more with, business development and, with our whatever Mr. Pengra's department's called, um, to make this more business friendly. But I hope you don't think we were beating up on you, Brock.
I have thick skin. I can handle it.
He's in code enforcement. He's got to have thick skin.
You're easy compared to the calls we get during the day, so.
Mr. Vice Chair, can
Yes.
I ask a clarifying question as you're kind of wrapping this up? I've heard from you, Councilman Bloom, Councilman McConaughey, Councilman Pack, Councilman Worthen, Councilman Jacob. Are you a supporter of kind of some of the general guidelines, the general direction being directed? Okay, I just want to make sure we've got the will of the majority. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for your work. Keep up the good work in
Thank you.
business licensing.
Just as a parenthetical on the end of that, I really do like that approach as far as what's the point of having business licenses? Let's pare this down to what does it actually need, right? What needs to be there? Obviously something needs to be, something needs to be there. There is a compelling city interest to have business licenses, period. But what is it? Define it as simple as possible, right? Let's pare this down. We don't have to make it harder than it has to be. Get it, throw the baby and the bathwater out, and let's see what we get when we start over. Let's make it as easy and simple as we can, and just kind of see what happens. What would we do if we all came together in a brainstorming session and says, why do we need business licenses? What's the least amount of code we can write to make a business license code, and see what we can come up with? And not only could we get the application on one page, we might be able to get the business license code down to 1 page, 2 pages. I mean, who knows, right? True.
Councilmember Pat.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, I agree. Anything that we can do to streamline and make it more easily, to make the process easier. I've had to establish a few different LLCs in West Jordan and a S Corp. And then, of course, you're going through the state protocol, the Department of Corporation and Commercial Code. And we're supposed to be a business-friendly environment in our city is what we're striving for, and also in our state. And we are noted for that, while also, let's say that the process has not necessarily been as efficient as possible, especially thinking back to the first business that I tried to apply for. It wasn't comprehensive in the knowledge of what was needed to happen. I still remember when I got a property tax bill just for equipment in the business. I didn't even know I was needing to pay property tax on the used equipment. So that bill was a shock. And then you need insurance on this, and you need a bond for that. And so I understand that it's a delicate balance of striving to have it be comprehensive enough that it covers all of the areas to help a budding entrepreneur and strive to be able to have everything on the up and up in terms of licensing, while also anything to cut through the red tape and make it as streamlined as possible is nice. So definitely we need to follow a process, but if it cannot be convoluted and make it more user friendly, pare it down. That would be my suggestion from someone who's had to go through the process quite a few times. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you. I like the idea of simplification and making things as easy as possible. At the same time, before we cut too much out, I'd be very curious to hear from business licensing, from code enforcement, perhaps from legal, as to why some of these things are out there. What problems have we run into the past that cause them to be brought up? There's some things like, as I'm reading through this, I'm thinking about summer door-to-door sales and how you have folks that are coming. Often they don't have the business license through the city. They haven't done the background check as any of that stuff that's required by the city. So those who are compliant with our ordinances, I want to make it as quick and easy and painless for them as possible. And those who aren't compliant, I'd like to make it easy for them to become compliant. Those who are willfully belligerent, however, again, I think residents are supportive of the idea of the city vetting out some of those door-to-door businesses to make sure that they're legitimate, established. There's a path for recourse should something not turn out as expected, especially where these are people who are coming to the door that might end up in the home. I think there's very much a reasonable cause for the city to be involved there. But some of the others, I'm not so sure about the need. There's definitely a fine line. So before we get, I know as I'm looking at this, seeing all these lines of code that are struck out, it's kind of energizing, and I want to keep erasing more and more and more. But at the same time, before we go too far, I'd like to know why and what impact could we potentially have. Sometimes we get excited, and I don't want to run faster than we should. The other request I would have is when this does come back, could you please tell us how many lines are being struck out? Because I would love to see, we were at this number, now we're at this number, because it does look significant. So just a fun fact. If you guys could have that, I would personally like that, but I'm just 1 of 7. Thank you.
Anyone else on business license code? I think we have come to the conclusion of our committee of the whole. I will entertain a motion. Because we do have to adjourn, so we can adjourn the council meeting at 7 o'clock. Motion to adjourn? I can go, we probably have time. I can probably go get some.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember McConaughey to adjourn, second by Councilmember Bloom. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We stand adjourned until 7 o'clock, where we will reconvene the city council meeting.